What does building a community in social media mean? We're here today with Lisa D. Sparks. She's the CEO of Verity Content and the host of the podcast Be Heard. Lisa, welcome.
Thank
Should we
you.
begin? Should we begin with being approachable? Let's start there.
Sure. Absolutely. When developing a community, I think it really is important to be approachable, but everyone has a different opinion of what approachable means. A lot of times, approachable is you believe the same thing that I do. But sometimes you have to balance that approachability with, all right, I'm going to tell my truth right now, and it might be uncomfortable for you. But
Hmm.
yes, you do have to begin with a common ground. You have to begin with a certain level of, this is where we're the same, this is where things are, these are the things that are important to me. Um, and then as you go along in the relationship, digital is just like anything else, then things start to get real. Things start to get much more serious. And that's the key, I think, to at least starting building up a community is, yeah, you want to be approachable, fun, smile, laugh, be as beautiful as you possibly can be externally, so that you can draw people in and they can hear you. But eventually, you're going to have to be opinionated, and that opinion might be different than what someone in your audience believes or thinks. So, yeah.
Well, and with the approachability, one of the reasons comes to my thought process at the beginning is because there are some people who take a look at social media as just being this private little club amongst their friends. For instance, on Facebook, even the platforms themselves sometimes don't want you to friend with people that you don't know, like LinkedIn. Um, but if you don't reach outside of your existing world, how do you grow?
Right. Well, one of the ways to grow, again, is to just connect with people um, who also have an audience. You want to be around people who are already talking to others and have a following and are excited about a particular industry or a particular subject. And before the show, clearly we were talking about, something like someone is talking about a niche subject that you wouldn't think has a lot of rabid followers. Well, a lot of times those little tiny crevices with specialized information, those are the areas where people are the most excited because it pertains to them, pertains directly to them. It's a
So
place where they can weird out. Go ahead, Cynthia.
yeah, so what you're saying is that um, if I'm reading this correctly, is that is those niche moments of your own personal interest are connect points to people who you might never meet or know or have the chance to connect with, and now are able to because of these technologies.
Right, absolutely. And especially in terms of building an audience,
Hmm.
if you can speak with someone who maybe has a following that's adjacent to your niche, okay,
Hmm.
like we were talking about cloud computing, but a lot of times within cloud computing, there are so many niches in there. It could be software as a service,
Hmm.
or it could be private networks. So there's like lots of little places in there. During an interview, during a talk, the guest might just throw something out, and they think that it's arbitrary, that it has, you know, nothing to do with anything. They're just being their true and authentic self, and it can light up a certain segment of the people who are listening, and then that's where they get their following from. So when it comes to developing an audience, of course, you have to be approachable, like we said, smile big, smile pretty, but then, it's like, but then just relax, be who you are, be yourself, allow those moments of true and organic authenticity to happen, and then
Yeah.
that's where the audience starts to come in, And it might be like 5 people, it might be 2 people, but you got to get excited about those other 2 people, because then you realize, hey, I'm not alone in this. I love, Batman costumes too, or something of that nature.
I think you just nailed something about the corporate community and why they have such trouble with building a community on social media or being in social media. I mean, how many times do we hear, oh, we tried Facebook, but it didn't work? And you just nailed it, because allow moments of authenticity to
Yeah,
come, just by being yourself. And I think that's, people want to be too perfect when they're on
yeah,
their
definitely.
corporate feeds.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. But I mean, the stakes are high. The stakes are high. So when it comes to that corporate side of things, yeah, you want it to be hyper controlled, because one errant word and you can lose a lot of profit share, uh, angry letters, and it can get ugly. So from a corporate standpoint, absolutely. But when it comes to your own business, actually, there's a lot of safety in niches. There's a lot of safety, because then okay, I understand what's going to rile this group up, and I know what's going to engage them and make them happy. But from a corporate standpoint, you're trying to get to everybody, and
Yeah.
everybody have lots of different opinions. So it can get very touchy. That's an interesting point, Debbie. Very interesting point.
So, all right. So with these niches though, are we
Yeah.
talking about more personal branding, or are we talking about more corporate conversations that they're trying to have or trying to create?
I think personal branding, it's great for it, and it's a hard discipline. It's very difficult, because I can speak from a personal branding side and from the corporate side, because
Mm-hmm.
I used to represent a very large corporation, right? But now, I have my own personal brand. But in each instance, I want to grow. I want
Yeah.
to grow. I want to be big. I want to be popular. Everyone does, right? You want that spotlight. And I mean, anybody who's willing, I think this, anybody who's willing to put their face out there and to step into the arena of public opinion,
Uh-huh.
like, you're taking a risk, but why are you taking that risk? It's because you have that desire, to be liked. Well,
Right.
the other side of that is somebody could come up and say, that was horrible what you just said. You're absolutely, you're full of it. You don't know what you're saying. So from a corporate standpoint, that's very difficult. And depending on the focus of the company, like if they have a very strong mission,
Mm-hmm.
vision statement, and if they're very clear about their objectives and what they're looking to do and who their audience is, then they can either reject the things that people say that might be off the wall, or they can take it very seriously, overreact, and possibly give people a platform that they don't necessarily, or they haven't earned. For instance,
Yeah.
if someone complains that you said, red onions are better than, yellow onions, certain organizations might actually give that red onion person a chance to, speak up and say, this is why I love them. And they might even have to
Yes.
apologize. So it depends on the organization and how much like intestinal fortitude they have, so to speak. But when it comes to personal branding, you have a lot more flexibility, because there's not always as much at stake as the corporate side is. So
Well,
it's
and
an
I
interesting
think from a personal side,
dynamic.
you're going to attract those people that you want in your community.
Right.
So it's almost, for lack of a better way to describe it, it's a very different type of community.
Okay.
I have
Tell me
to
more about
I have to add also something about the onion thing, when you
that.
mentioned,
Okay.
uh, and this kind of ties into what you were saying, Cynthia and Lisa, is that with the Onion community, it reminds me of one of my Facebook friends, because I would not have met him if it wasn't for Facebook, because he was actually a
Yeah.
friend of another friend who I connected with because I made a comment on a public media person's wall, and we shared the same politics. So the comment I made got us into a personal conversation. We became friends, and through her, he and I became friends. And then now he's friends with my sister, and he's an onion farmer in New York, and he's hilarious and funny, and he's a businessman, and he uses social for business. But it just reminds me that you don't know who people know, and I go
Right.
back to
That's
the
right.
approachability.
Right.
You can't just say, oh, well, I'm not going to friend them because I don't know who you are. Nobody would
Mhm.
ever meet anybody. I mean, do you do that when you go to a cocktail party? Oh, I can't talk to you because I don't know you. So you want to carry
Yeah.
that way?
I think what it
Absolutely.
boils down to is both in the corporate community as well as in personal branding. I think it's most important to try to start to identify the common affinity or affinities. And the reason why I say that, yesterday I was at a luncheon. I've had conversations with all of these 60 and above women, female mentors over the past week. And one mentioned to me that she thinks that media doesn't even address any of the issues related to people 60 and up.
Mhm.
And I sat at lunch yesterday with two lovely women, and both of them said the exact same thing. So one is wanting to build a community for women 60 and up. The others have interests and have large communities of their own in real life, 60 and up. And one of them is very active in the raising money and awareness about Parkinson's. So, in a way, I could see them all developing personal communities, and I could see them creating a community amongst themselves, and I can see the one with Parkinson's taking her little niche in that direction. So my question
Yeah.
for you is, here are three women who are very savvy business women, extremely intelligent, but they feel um, not a fear. I think they're connecting with me because they want to understand more about how to use technology to create these communities. And I
Mhm.
think they're feeling a fear or a discomfort with the how to use social media, and
Right.
tend to watch and read social media as if it's a newspaper, or watching a TV news, or a stream of information coming at them, but not realizing they can jump into that stream and start creating that community of their own. What are your thoughts for them?
That's interesting, isn't it? That
Yeah.
now media is no longer a passive activity. Now it's an participatory activity where you can put your voice out there. You can be in the stream of things. And we, all three of us here, know how scary that is,
Yeah.
right? And so when we come out of that area where we're just sitting back, looking and receiving, when we come out of that, we have to think in a much different way.
Right.
And friends, with Parkinson's and with that big challenge, she can actually turn that challenge into something amazing and into something beautiful, because there are so many people in the world who need support as they face that disease, as they face that illness,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
even though there are most likely thousands, if not millions, of other people who are talking about it, they don't have her voice there. And
Yeah.
her voice resonates with someone. It could be a life-saving endeavor for her to put her information out there. And that's when I tell myself, I actually love Marie Forleo.
Yeah.
And one of the taglines that she has is that, I'm paraphrasing, but the world needs the thing that we offer, that unique thing that we offer, whether it's one of the most saturated niches in the world or whether it's a niche that has never been touched. We still need to put our information out there. Now, when I started my podcast, and I'm like little Miss Techie, I
Yeah.
will code things in a minute. Can I just tell you how difficult it was from a technical standpoint to get that podcast up and running? And I had done one before. It was years ago when podcasts first came on the scene. But to do it again, I mean, it was mind-blowingly difficult. But I don't think it was because of the technical standpoint. I haven't talked to anybody about this yet, so this is a Newsmakers exclusive. I think that I think the reason why it was so difficult was because it was going to have an impact, and there's a lot of resistance just in general in the ether to things that are going to have an impact on others. There's a book called The War of Art, and it's by Stephen Pressfield. I recommend that to anybody who creates anything. Stephen Pressfield happens to be a novelist and a writer, and he focuses on like ancient Rome and putting it in a dramatic context. But the guy is brilliant because he really boiled down what it is to face resistance as somebody who just creates anything.
Yeah.
And all of these technical challenges came my way, things that would be ticky tack and would usually be nothing, but they blew up. Why? Because what I was doing and what I am doing is having an impact on other people, even if it's just one other person, it's still having a huge impact, and it can be very, very difficult for things like that to have a voice and to have a real push and to come out into the world. It's a lot like the birthing experience. There's going to be some turmoil there. And so that's what I would tell your friends. Let them know that even the most technical people in the world, even the most geeky people in the world, have difficulty creating because there's just something in the ether. There's something there's constantly that resistance to
Yeah.
creating something completely new, completely different, that's going to have an impact, that's really going to change people's lives, that's going to encourage other people. There have been so many books that have changed my life, and when I hear about the story behind the book, I'm like, oh my goodness, no wonder
Yeah.
that person has such a difficult time putting that book out into the market because it has such a huge reach. So the sad thing about it, but it's kind of true. It's like if you are having a difficult time getting something out, keep going, keep pushing, keep doing it, because once you actually get it into the market and get it in front of people, it's going
Uh-huh.
to change. It's going to change someone's life. It might change millions of lives, or it might change two. But one of those two people might go on to change millions of lives. You have no idea.
Yeah.
So that's what I would tell your friends who are a bit older.
Uh-huh.
I want to say one more thing about that, and then I'll cede the mic to you guys, so to speak. But I think one of the worst things that happens in the technical realm today is the feeling that elderly people have, or slightly older people might have, that they don't have a voice, that they cannot contribute, that this has passed them by. I hear a lot of negative talk
Uh-huh.
from people who are slightly older, where they say, "Oh, I know nothing about that stuff," or "I am." One person said that they were technically dyslexic, and I said, you know what? Even dyslexic people find a way to read and to write, you know. But you have to have that desire to go ahead and do that, and we're really missing out on the voice of wisdom because
I totally agree with that.
the key is not necessarily the technical stuff. You can hire that stuff out.
Right.
Really you can. You can, if you get the right person, you can get to, but it's about your breadth of knowledge, what you've experienced.
Yeah.
Please, people, do not rob us of that. I need to hear it.
Yeah.
I am so humbled especially creating my own company, creating my own thing, I need wisdom and understanding. And I need to hear from somebody who knows exactly what they're doing so that I don't make the same mistake. So I think it's a very cruel thing that's happening to people who are older, where they're convinced, whether it's from outside or possibly from inside themselves, where they think they don't have anything to contribute. Nothing could be farther from the truth. If you're listening to this and you feel like can't join the conversation because you're of a certain age, that's a lie. Don't believe it. Please create. Please put your things on your blog, on even a Facebook post. A random Facebook post could get out to millions of people if it has the right message. So please, we need to hear you. Join the conversation, engage.
Yeah,
Don't rob us of all of your knowledge.
I
one of the
think that
things I hear too is that I'll overhear a conversation of the same kind of people that you're talking about
Right.
who don't hear from anybody anymore because they're not part of the conversation. They think, oh, nobody uses a phone anymore. Nobody does this anymore. Nobody does that
Exactly.
anymore. They are. They're just
Exactly.
not doing it with you because you're not approachable.
It really is. It's about being approachable, about participating, and it could possibly be that when you're of a certain age, you don't want to look like an idiot. Basically, learning anything new, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to look dumb, and the tolerance for that, I would imagine, gets lower as we get older. I can remember when I was learning Spanish. But I was learning it when I was like 20, like really learning it, being immersed when I was 20. And yeah, you get laughed at. You make you say the wrong word, and this actually happened to me. The entire cafe was in tears laughing because I used the wrong word about something. People were rolling on the floor. Well, I would imagine that your tolerance for something like that diminishes over time,
Yeah.
right? And my older friends, if you can please, I'm not going to laugh, okay, because I know what it's like. Please share with us, share your knowledge, because it could make the difference for someone who's really struggling. Show us what you got. You really do have a part of the community here.
I want to shift gears entirely, though, from one generation to another,
Okay.
because I believe also that the millennials are missing out on that wisdom, and that the
Yeah.
millennials could really use mentoring and coaching in terms of how they get themselves out there and brand themselves instead of thoughtlessly putting things out there they might regret later on, or is one tactic I think that could be very important. But to consider building a community, I used to tell my son, you're not going to remember 99% of the people in your sixth grade class or whatever,
Oh,
right? They're not going to exist for you in 10 years. So why do you care what they think about you now, right? You won't even remember their names in 10 years. With teenagers, and millennials, if they knew how to build that community and that platform for themselves that would lift them up into all kinds of potential opportunities, I think that's an entirely another phenomenal voice that
sure.
could be a community builder.
Absolutely. To create that niche.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And to find a place where they belong. And I think that's really a challenge for somebody who's in sixth grade all the way
yeah.
to somebody who is, maybe in the job market and looking to become employed. Um, I saw a cartoon the other day, and the basic gist of it was, the person who posted the job said, okay, can you come to our office at 10 a.m. for an interview? And then the person responds via email and they say, could you come here to me? You know?
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, you know. And I remember when my generation, you know, Generation X, when we were being maligned. I think every generation that goes
Yeah.
into the work world is looked at as, you know, lazy, insignificant, not doing things the right way. And so now it's the quote millennials term. But
Yeah.
I distinctly remember as Generation X, Generation Y, I'm kind of like in the middle of those two. So I guess maybe X.5 or something. I don't know. Where I was definitely maligned. And the funny thing about it, my parents taught me a very strong work ethic, and I was not allowed to shirk on anything I was taught. So it's not a completely generational thing. I think it's more of if you teach us, yeah, okay, fine. If you want to make a joke at the expense of younger people, fine. You know, do your thing. But I think you earn that right when you actually teach and when you share and when you
Hmm.
give out information. So then the person doesn't have an excuse. So it's like, okay, if they're screwing up, that screw up is on them. It's not for your, you know, lack of trying to educate them. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree. But all right, so going back to community, if we were able to figure out ways to help seniors get their wisdom out there, and we were able to help teenagers post their personal best, right?
Hmm.
I could see a lot of powerful things coming out of that and powerful
Absolutely.
communities happening from that. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm thinking more on an individual level as opposed to um, a corporate standpoint.
Yeah.
What do you think the possibilities might be for creating a community that bridges that?
Look, digital mentorship. I think it's great. There's no excuse. That takes away all of the excuses where a person who is slightly older and successful, I mean, pretty much every laptop has a like a webcam built in now. So there's really no excuse to say, all right, I don't have time or I can't get out there. Yeah, you actually do. You know, so there is a way to bridge the divide. There is a way to bridge that gap, and I think people would be very surprised. Younger people are more open to mentorship and to learning than you would think, but they definitely have a wry sense of humor. They definitely, you know, they'll get you.
Well,
And
my
they can.
question then is, are there currently digital mentorship communities like that? Do you know of
I,
any?
I, I do not know of one. I do
I
not
don't
know of
either.
one. And who knows? Maybe that's something that we need to look into. That's the great thing. That's another great thing about where who we are, the time that we're in now, is we can go from an idea to implementation within 2 hours, within 3 hours.
Absolutely.
You know, slap up a Facebook ad, pay like $20, and we have an instant thing. And we just started with an idea.
Yeah.
But yet, human nature is still the same. We still have fears. We still don't want to be laughed at, you know. And as great as the potential is for us to create things and actually have it be and exist, internally we have more of a resistance.
Yeah.
Going back to Stephen Pressfield and the war of art, we still have that inner resistance where it's like, what are they going to say about me? Is this going to work? Am I just throwing money down the drain? That is one of the biggest mindset obstacles for Facebook ads that you have ever seen. It
Really?
makes people Facebook ads go. It makes people feel like I'm taking $20 and I'm throwing it out the window, because you never know if there's actually going to be that return, if people are actually going to fill out the freaking form, you
Right.
know. So
Right.
it can be so scary. More than anything, I find that it's about mindset. That's one of the biggest things that I put on my podcast. Before I say anything else, you know, like giving people information, recommendations for books, it's where's your head at? Because I want people to actually do something. And if your head isn't in the right place, you'll be paralyzed. It'll be just like your friends, just taking in information, receiving, and not really putting that information out there and sharing with the masses that, hey, this is what I have to say.
This is, my mind is suddenly exploded with possibilities.
Exactly.
That's great.
That's where my
That's
mindset
awesome.
is.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. I mean, it's a daily thing. I think that mindset reset, I have to do it all of the time, even more than once or twice a day, is that mindset reset. So, yeah,
I love
that's
that.
great that you feel the possibilities. That's awesome.
The other aspect about building a community is just taking it to the mechanical aspect. And Cynthia, you mentioned that earlier about using social platforms as a broadcast tool and just watching and reading media instead of participating.
Hmm.
Participating is also what helps build your audience. So, for example, I find that if I don't, and I have a goal to actually take minimum maybe 2 tweets a day to respond to somebody's tweet, at least 2 a day. I do usually more, some days less. But by actually engaging in the conversations and finding people's tweets, resharing, and really, really being present in that community also helps
Hmm.
grow my followers. I've got a lot more followers
Absolutely.
just doing that. And Facebook, well, my Facebook followers are not necessarily going up as high, but the people that are there are solid, and the people that are there are very, very responsive, and it's quite an active community. Of course, anybody who's in my Facebook knows that I'm pretty active in there, but I'm also active on Twitter, and I find that even on LinkedIn has increased as well, because when you're
Yeah.
participating in groups and when you're actually uh, replying and participating and acknowledging people and maybe sharing something positive, that also helps build your community.
Yeah, I
So
think sharing forward is really a great way, because people don't realize the power of that amplification of that voice about one particular topic as it moves forward. I think people will post their own things, or they'll read what's going on in most cases, but are more hesitant to get into the conversation, and sometimes even more hesitant to share things forward that all the people in their community might appreciate.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really interesting point, if I may, about platforms.
mhm.
Uh, People can be very intimidated when it comes to social media platforms. And I like how you just broke down how you use each of the major ones. And what I'm seeing in forums sometimes when I fill them out, people say, Where do you live online?" And I love that terminology.
Ah,
Where do you live online? For me, I am all about Facebook, okay? But I also, um, Instagram is one of my
yeah,
favorite platforms too, because I can take it anywhere and it's built for my phone.
mhm.
Whereas Facebook is not built for my phone. It's clunky, like all get out. You have to have two separate apps to
Yeah.
really use Facebook on your phone, and it takes up all of my data and space. It's really horrible. So from a desktop standpoint, I'm a Facebook girl all the way, and I'll put up with things. But with Instagram, I have a much more authentic relationship with the people who I follow there than I do on Facebook for sure.
Well,
So
and I'm going to
Instagram,
shift it. I'm going to shift it a little bit away from the
sure,
just the platforms, but you're also talking about the methods, the devices that we use for communication. So you're
exactly.
talking you know, some platforms work better for the phone. Some platforms work better when you're sitting at your desk. And I have people that constantly say, I'm going to email you. Well, that's all fine and great, except for I'm not sitting at a desk. Rarely am I sitting at a desk. So I ask them in turn to text me if if they want an immediate response. And so that is my preferred method of communication. So I think bigger than finding out people's online where they live and where they are the most, finding out their daily activities and what devices they most want to be communicated through is important too.
Yeah, yeah. We do that with the
Those
show.
both are really great. That's a great observation. And you say you do that with the show, Debbie? Really?
Yeah, we do that with our show guests, and in fact, when I know you're in Facebook, so I didn't ask you, but for for a new guest who we don't really know, the one thing I'll ask them is when we share the inside link to the show, where will you see it first? Shall I email it to you? Shall I tweet it to you? Or shall I send it to you via Facebook?
Right.
So I'll ask them that, and because your preferred method of communication is key, because you want people, if it's something
It
important,
really
you want
is
them to see it.
because it's about the speed. It's about the speed and how quickly you're going to get things done. And so that's the thing I'm going to use. If I know that you're always on Instagram, I'm going to DM you on Instagram. That's it, because I want to get at you. Absolutely right. I think that's so powerful to ask people at first, and also the device portion, which is very, very important. I think some of the newer platforms out here, like Snapchat, really difficult for me to kind of engage and figure out what's going on with that personally for me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
But for other people, I mean, it all depends quickly you want to get things done. So I think it's a key consideration to building up your audiences. So if you want to get at that group of people, how quickly do you want them to respond?
Yeah.
Okay, so then where are they living and what are they using? What does their house look like, so to speak? So what are they using? And for some people, it's natural for them to use it on their phone.
And the one
For
thing
me,
nobody uses now is a telephone.
nobody
An
uses a
actual
telephone.
telephone.
Nobody uses a telephone. It's crazy. Do you remember like the rotary ones? My family used to have
Yes.
one when I was a little girl, and I used to just play with it. I thought it was so much fun. I really did.
My daughter went into a hotel room, and she must have been about 3, and she could not believe this phone. She'd never seen a phone before, other than
Yeah.
a mobile phone, and she played with that. It was like I didn't even need to bring any toys.
It's a toy. It's a toy, really. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, that almost brings me back to that sort of bridging that divide, because I have an 18-year-old son and I have a 7-year-old daughter, and even they are there's a generational divide there. I mean,
Yeah.
the little ones have never known life without information at their fingertips, and yet they're in school systems that are still stand and deliver information, and that doesn't resonate with them in the same way, because when she wants to find out something, she searches it on YouTube. This child doesn't know how to spell, but she sure does know how to search for what she's looking for. The
Exactly.
answers.
It's very true. It's
The
very true. And
teaching
I
has to
love it.
change. Yeah, I mean, and so then do we mentor the teachers, or do
Yeah.
teachers need to be mentored to be facilitators, or
I think we need to change the
Interesting.
curriculums
I like that
altogether.
word.
yeah, as
That's true.
opposed to information sources, because they're no longer, there's no teacher out there that knows more than these kids can find out on YouTube.
I think if a
honestly.
school system doesn't have these platforms and the education to develop these platforms and train their teachers to teach these platforms in their universities and schools, they need to close their schools.
Well,
Right.
that's evolving too, and there's communities specific to that in terms of education technology, and instructional design that is growing. So you see major teaching communities happening online with instructors who want to move forward with that. And that's a perfect example of building a community around affinities. We're
I
teachers,
think
we're not getting what we need from the system, and we need to find it online from our other colleagues in the world.
I think the key also is you can't teach curiosity.
True.
You can inspire curiosity, okay, but I think we're born with it, and
Yeah.
either we run into a teacher who tries to quash it and say no, do it my way, and oh, that's it, or we run into a teacher that says absolutely research that. Here are more resources, or tell me more, or open report on that. And I was really blessed to have one or two teachers who were fine with this and loving the subjects that I loved. So facilitator was a word that you used, Cynthia, and I thought that was a very powerful word. Teachers really are facilitators of curiosity. So that was my one point. But then my second point on that is, yes, there's a lot of information out there, and it's sometimes easily accessible, but we're
Mm.
not teaching people always how to use that information and how to interpret that information and find the truth.
Yeah,
And,
true.
I'm not really taking this conversation into a place you don't want it, but whether you're not, whatever party you're an affinity to, let's say,
Uh-huh.
um, yes, you can get information from anywhere, but how are you using it? That's where we need our teachers. So a
Well,
segment
that
of a
gets into
document
critical thinking.
or a
Yeah,
segment of a speech. All right, I think you know where I'm going with this. You take a segment of a speech and then say, plop, now it's mine. Well,
yeah,
that information is easily accessible. You
yeah,
understand? But you actually teach and say, wait a minute, that's plagiarism. That's not how you do things. This is not
right.
the right thing to do.
Ah,
So,
you just
yes,
gave me an
there's
idea.
still a need for education,
Yeah,
and maybe it's more of a moral education than anywhere else. It's like, okay, you have this information. Now, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to interpret
right.
it? Or is it even the truth? A
Yeah,
lot of
Well,
times we can get things from the internet, and it's been manufactured, but
yeah,
we're taking it as the honest goodness truth. It's like, I like encyclopedias because they've been vetted.
yeah,
I like actual books because there's a group of people behind it, editors, who have said, okay, this is right, this isn't right. Things have been fact checked.
mm,
Whereas, when you have easy access to information, there's also easy creation of information. So
mm,
well,
building
and
building
when we're talking about
following
sharing
up front.
our information, whether it's true, and we're talking about truth in what we are sharing as well. Um,
Yeah.
that brings me to another point, is, and we mentioned this a little bit the off the feed before we hit the live.
Yeah.
Um, what you post in your profiles, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want your digital legacy to look like? Do you want it to
Yeah.
look like a legacy of hate? Do you want it to look like you're inspiring your community? How you respond and what you post, what does it look like, and is it true? Have you vetted the truth? So a lot of people will share the clickbait because of the headlines, and they end up being phishing sites,
mm,
or they'll
Right.
share these outrageous headlines that are not true, and then you just have to look at
Right.
where the source came from. It's not a legitimate
What's the
source.
source?
So
Right.
what
Exactly.
we need to
Exactly.
teach people to mean everything they write. Just because it's social media does not mean it's not public. It does not mean, even if you don't have a public profile and you're sharing it just among your friends, it can still be public. It is still
It's a
public.
part of your legacy.
And you
It's a
don't
part
own
of
the
your
platform, Facebook does. And
right.
it's a public platform regardless of what your settings are. So mean everything you post, and how do we want our digital legacies to be? And that should be also how we build our communities. The people we have in our communities should be, what we see in our feeds should reflect what we want our legacies to be. And I mean, we need to broaden our scope. I mean, we may be Democrats or Republicans, and we may have one thought process, but if we don't embrace other points of views, then we live in a bubble. So anyway, I'll throw
Very
that out
true.
there.
Those are the things to me. Those are the things that we need to be taught. Civics. The history of our country, or just how to disagree with people.
Yeah.
In a way where it maintains the person's dignity. You know what I mean? That's what I want. So, yeah.
Well, and
I don't
how to
know how that,
debate? How do you debate in a human and respectful way without having to do name calling and putting down? And I mean, I find that when I get trolls on my accounts, they're very quick to be, and I have to find ways to respond to them or simply not respond to them, um, based on,
yeah.
you know,
I'll delete them if it's really bad. Like if it's
yeah,
really hateful, if it furthers the conversation, even though I may not like their point of view, I'll leave the comment. But if it's something
yeah,
hateful and it's just to create crap, I will delete it because it's my feed.
yeah.
I publish it, I control
That's
it.
right.
So that comes
That's
up to
right.
like standing up for your voice while you're creating your community, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and people know your position. But I do have to say that there is an element of fear there as you're building up, because as opinionated, so that they don't
Hmm.
scare anybody away. They want that number. They want that I have 10,000, 20,000 quote active unquote followers, right? And the point is, you're not going to attract or
The
keep
people who
all
matter.
of the people happy
Yeah.
right at every single moment. It's not going to happen. So some people intentionally hide their beliefs, and it's interesting
Right.
to see because I know people, and I hear what they say publicly, and then I hear what they say privately when we're just hanging out, and they're two different things sometimes.
Mm.
And eventually that's going to be exposed. Eventually
Yes.
that's going to come out. People have a very good truth meter, these days. I think we have good truth meters.
Mm-mm. You never cease to fail to inspire me. Everything that you put out there, I feel
Yeah.
very in tune with and aligned with, because you're fearless about putting yourself out there, but you do it in a positive way that does make a difference. So I personally want to thank you for that.
Yeah, me too.
So,
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
so. Anyway, with that
Thank
being
you.
said, one of the things that we do at the end of each show is we ask our guest a very intense question, and we
Uh,
want we want you to come up with exactly what comes from your heart, because it's really the most poignant part of our show. And the question is, if you could do anything to challenge people to do something that will lift them up this week or lift up the world this week, what would that be? Who would you challenge, and what's your challenge of the week?
right. Hard and journal. That's my challenge of the week. And this is for everybody and anybody. Start a journal.
Oh,
And so go to your local convenience store, get yourself a little binder, a little pad, and a pen. And before you go to bed, write down everything that happened that day. But not only everything that happened, but how you feel about it. Why am I challenging people to do that? We really need to be honest with ourselves before we can be honest with other people, And so we have to be
yeah.
and get in touch with, okay, this is how this made me feel. I don't like that, and or I do
Mm,
like that. I think it's one of the healthiest things for any person to do is to have a consistent daily of this is how I'm feeling. Another thing that I would like to say to people about that, like
mhm,
within that journaling, is it doesn't have to be longhand. You can use bullet points. Sad
mm.
today, and that could be, or I'm here in Philly, and I was crossing the street, and I had the right of way. I'm a pedestrian, but not everybody believes in that here. And that's cool. I get it. And so I actually wrote that down in my journal. I call you something, which is what happened. When people call you something other than who you are or what you
Yeah.
are, that can really have an effect. And so it helps me to center and to say, no, that expletive that someone just called me, that's not who I am. This is who I am
Yeah.
about what they just called me just now. And so it's healthier. It really is
Mm,
healthier, and I think it might help us to be kinder to each other if
mm.
we understand how we feel. It's an acknowledgement. I can't say enough about journaling. And if you notice, like instantly, as soon as you said it, I gave that response because I believe in it so strongly. I've been journaling since I learned how to write.
Nice.
So
Nice. Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us today. I hope that
you're welcome. Thank you for having
our we will stay in touch, and we look forward to being part of your community and you being part of ours. So thank you for joining us.
me.
What is the
Yes,
best way for
Yeah.
people who are interested in you and your advice to reach out to you, and what can you best offer?
The best way to get in touch with me is just to go to my website, lisadadsparks.com. That's D.
Mm,
So lisadadsparks.com. And there you can sign up for just all of my alerts, all the cool stuff that I have going on. Right now, I'm on hiatus for my podcast. So
mm-hmm.
the Be Heard Show podcast, it's weekly. We just finished up our first season about 2 weeks ago. And so we'll be
Nice.
coming back with full episodes. Thank you. We'll be coming back with full episodes in September. Our episodes are going to be about 45 minutes now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the summer, I just do 5-minute podcast shows, and then I have summaries on my website. So go to lisadadsparks.com. You'll see all of that cool stuff. But I have a downloadable resource guide, and it
Mm,
lists out all of the resources that I gave during the first season, and a lot of them are either no cost or low cost. There are some where you are going to have to pay for them, some of the resources, but it's not going to break the bank. So the resource guide itself is absolutely free. The only
mm-hmm.
thing you have to do is give me your email address, and it's all yours. Or
Nice.
you can shoot me an email. I don't mind, and I read every email I get. Lisa@lisadadsparks.com. Again, that's D as in Danielle. If you don't use the D, you don't get me. LisaDSparks.com.
That's great.
That's a good
Awesome.
tagline.
Awesome. All right, sweetie, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back again
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you.